I have the power to heal myself. You have the power to heal yourself. Together, we have the power to heal the world. We all come from the same source. And if you change the spin on one molecule that's entangled with another one, even though they're separated by distance, that one will change its spin as well.
So let's say somebody's listening who is really struggling with some kind of a health issue and they'd like to do some type of energy healing on themselves. Do you have any specific recommendations of things they could try?
Absolutely.
I recently launched Love Covered Life Academy, where I offer monthly masterclasses at a deeply discounted rate. These courses include profound meditations that will guide you into a deep spiritual connection, monthly teaching videos, and daily practices that we get to do together in community. All this you'll get to experience with a growing community group of conscious, spiritually minded individuals, and monthly live Q&A sessions with me where I deep dive into your spiritual practice with you and answer your questions. Sign up here. I cannot wait to see you there.
I am here today with Britt Kaylor, who ended up on a spiritual journey of discovery after her daughter was born with MCAS, resulting in serious reactions to an extensive list of food and chemicals. And without giving away the whole story, she has had quite a journey with energy healing for both herself, her daughter, and others. And I'm really excited to dive into her story today. Britt, thank you so much for joining me.
Thank you so much, Melissa. It's my honor to be here.
Likewise, I would love to start at the beginning of your journey, if that's okay with you. And I would love to start by hearing about your own personal journey, because I know that you had a list of health symptoms yourself that you healed through functional medicine.
Yes, that's right. Well, going back to the beginning, I was raised in an evangelical Christian home, and it was pretty conservative. The things that I do now would probably have been considered off limits at the time. I was super involved, going to Bible study, going to Christian camps, going to leadership retreats, leading worship for starting in high school for youth groups, then in college groups on campus, and then finally for church congregations afterwards. And so I didn't grow up with an openness to any of the things that I'm doing at this point. At a certain point, I ended up walking away from my faith a little bit. It was not that it wasn't without merit. I learned some really, really important things about kindness to other people, about faith. For example, one time when I was on a retreat, we had a lesson on mountain moving faith, and it was taken from a passage in the Bible that says, if you have the faith of a mustard seed, you can move mountains. And so I was sitting on the beach at that point and just meditating on that. And I was so lost in meditation that when the tide came in, it took my sandals out. And
Oh,
they
no.
were and I thought to myself, well, if God can move mountains, surely he can find my shoes. And I was a poor college student, didn't have very much money. So it was kind of an important thing to me at that point. And I just walked 2 blocks down along the path to go into the house where I was staying. And I thought, well, if you can move mountains, my shoes can come back to me along that path. And they didn't come back. And I thought, oh, well, I suppose maybe I'm supposed to learn another lesson. So I walked the 2 blocks inland to where I was staying. And there were my sandals sitting there, soaking wet on the porch, just waiting for me. And come to find out, they had washed up next to somebody else from my group who didn't know that they were mine. He just thought, these are small. They probably belong to one of the girls. There's a bunch of girls in this house. There are a bunch of girls in a couple other houses too. He just brought them off on my porch. And that always stuck with me, that God or the universe, whatever you would like to call it, is intimately interested in what we care about. What we, our needs, our wants, our desires are known. And there is an interest if you ask. And so that was something that stuck with me through my life. But at the same time, there were things that didn't fit well with me. And some of those being the idea that only people who believed in a certain way about Jesus were saved and the rest of the world were lost. And I never really liked that concept. I got some answers that I was able to tolerate with and go along with when I was younger. But then I met my husband and he was Jewish. And I started to realize, man, he has so much value. He has something to say. He has very interesting things to say about politics and society and ethics. And I don't think he's lost, really. And so as we grew in our relationship, and I kept hearing from people from my church, hey, this Israel can come to church. And they were always accepting of them, but it was always like, are we going to get saved? I could kind of hear that underlying thought in there. And I was like, yeah, I don't think he needs to be saved. So I went to go get my master's in nutrition. And at that point, I thought, well, I kind of have an excuse to take a break from this. I'm super busy, and I'll just put it on the side for a little bit. But functional medicine ended up being a doorway into exploring spirituality in other ways. And so, we huge focus on nutrition, environmental inputs, your stress levels, your relationships. There's also within functional medicine a very profound respect for spirituality. And so that came up in some of our classes. And I began to be aware that there was a huge body of research that demonstrates a profound beneficial effect of spirituality on your well-being, not only your physical health, but your emotional health. And surprise, surprise, it's not just one religion. There's a lot of different paths. And that was pretty profound for me. I realized that, I'd put my spirituality on hold, but maybe there was some value in it. And maybe I could start exploring it in a less restrictive way. And so I experimented a little bit with energy medicine, and it was just a really fun experience being in school. Functional medicine and holistic practices have been so beneficial for me. I ended up healing my depression. I'd been born with a lot of allergy type issues, but it ended up manifesting in depression, joint pain, fatigue, things like that. And so in college, I had become aware of naturopathy. And so I went to go see a naturopath who really started me on the journey to a more holistic perspective. And he put me on a fantastic diet, a clean diet, whole foods diet that eliminated some of my reactions. And I immediately felt so much better. And so over the years, I've used various physical practices that have helped me so much. I've had to heal my gut a couple of times because sometimes you fall off the bandwagon and have to start over again and fix a few things. So I probably healed my gut 4 times using different functional medicine modalities, juice fasting or different supplements and things like that. But then when my daughter was born, she was born with MCAS, which is mast cell activation syndrome. And she was much more reactive than I had ever been. She reacted to foods through breast milk. I had to eliminate 20 foods to keep her from vomiting. And then when we started introducing foods, it became readily apparent that she was reacting to 50% of all single ingredients. And that was a lot. We're talking not just like, bread that has several ingredients, or, I don't know, one of those packaged snacks for kids that has 30 ingredients in it. We're talking a raspberry or an egg or a potato. And she would not just spit it up a little bit, it was vomiting. And she started out in the pretty small at the 10th percentile of weight. and she quickly dropped to the 0.1 percentile. So if you lined up 1,000 kids, she would have been the smallest. And I realized that my functional medicine skills were not adequate to help her. She, with her reacting to 50% of all foods and ingredients and even some chemicals, functional medicine frequently relies on formulations of supplements to heal the gut or to address maybe some liver dysfunction. And there was no way she was going to tolerate a formulation that had that many ingredients in it. And so I could do single ingredients, but to work up to where I could get to all the ones online that she might need and that she wouldn't react to, it would have taken years. She might have been 18 by the time I got all that stuff to work. And so I dived a little bit heavier into energy medicine. I tried combining what's called NATE, which is Nembutalpad's allergy elimination technique, and I combined some acupressure protocols from people who've published their protocols online, and I only got about a 50% success rate. That wasn't good enough because to risk every time trying a new food that she was going to vomit, or maybe she had other reactions too. One of them was so severe that she would have tics. So she would have neurological symptoms and she would jerk her head down or her arm would go flying up to her head. And that was really scary. I knew that every time we were trying a food, there was a possibility that it was going to affect her brain. And so that 50% success rate was not good enough. So my functional medicine skills could keep her out of the hospital, keep her from needing a GI tube, but I couldn't make her thrive. And she was in a program called the Early Intervention Program. And that's for kids that have delays of some sort. And by the time she was 1 year old, she was still on purees. So she had a pretty severe feeding delay. And her occupational therapist suggested that I take her to a physical therapist in the area that could do a organ manipulation. And she thought that might help. So I went to go see Janet Potts in Fort Collins, Colorado. And she told me, you know, my techniques are really difficult to do on somebody so little as Ellie. But I do have this other modality. And so she told me a little bit about it. It was developed by Master Zhigong Sha, who is a Tao healer. He is a master of several Chinese arts, including Qigong and other healing arts. He's a medical doctor, like a Western medical doctor, and also a Chinese medicine doctor. It's one of those guys where you're like, how did you fit so much in one life? It's pretty amazing. So she said, hey, I can try one of his techniques if you'd like. And it was a financial commitment, which at the time, you know, we weren't thriving financially. And it took a pretty big step of faith to agree to that. I said yes, and I think my husband said yes, just simply because I did. And so she sent us home. She said, I'll do my thing. I'll let you know by a text when it's done, and then keep me posted. So we went home. And the only way to find out if this was going to work was to introduce some new foods. And so we introduced first food and no reaction. Next food, no reaction. And we got to, I think it was 8 or 9 foods in a row with no reaction. And that was pretty remarkable considering before we had a 50-50 chance. So that's like flipping heads 50 times, or not 50 times, but 8 or 9 times in a row. Not impossible, but it was a pretty good sign. And so I started learning from Janet. Janet and Julie were both master teachers in Master Zhigong Sha's methods. And she taught me a few of the basic techniques. And one day one of the techniques that he teaches is tracing calligraphy. He's actually able to write these calligraphies and basically transmit a channel directly to source. through them. And so if you're not used to connecting, it makes it easier to connect. And so I was tracing one of these calligraphies for my husband. He had been diagnosed with a squamous cell carcinoma on his back. And when they went in for the first biopsy, it was squamous cell and it was touching the margin, which means it's all the way to the margin. It's probably on the other side. And so he was scheduled for a second excision to go get the rest of it. And so I decided to trace these calligraphies for him. And while I was doing that, what I saw in my mind's eye was smoke that just seemed to drift away. And it was almost like the cancer was going up in smoke and leaving. And then when he went to go get the wider excision, there was nothing, there was zero cancer in it. And so that was pretty remarkable because it's very unlikely that cancer is going to go all the way up to that one cell thickness layer and not be on the other side. And so I was starting to build up, hey, this stuff is working. This is great. And so Janet and Julie recommended that I go ahead and sign up for Master Shah's entry-level healing certification program, and that's called Dow Hands. So I signed up for that. And at that point, they were teaching the classes. And there's a point at which they transmit some of this ability. And when they did that, I just felt electricity go through my entire body. I'd never felt anything like that before in my life. And it was really exciting. I knew something was happening. And what I ended up doing was combining Dow Hands with my functional medicine background. And sometimes being very specific in your requests is beneficial. And so I would do these Dow Hand sessions for the microbiome and for your liver function and detoxification. And at a certain point, I thought, I'll bet I can do this for harmonizing my daughter with all of her foods that she's reacting to. And so I started doing these Dow Hands healing sessions and visualizing that food being in harmony with so many different systems in the body. And then we decided to try and introduce some of these foods again. And I was keeping spreadsheets because I'm a total nerd. I ended up realizing that we had brought my 50% success rate with just the acupressure innate up to 80%. And that was a huge improvement. And then that extra 20% that I couldn't clear on my own, I would take those foods to a session where one of Master Shah's master teachers was leading a group session. And there's a lot of power in the intentions in a group. And we brought my success rate up to 100%. And so over the course of a year, maybe a little bit more, we ended up resolving my daughter's reactions to over 100 foods. And at this point, she can eat pretty much anything that she wants. We can't do additives. You know, in the US, we allow 10,000 or more additives into our food. And I haven't tackled those yet. But for my daughter to be able to eat a clean, whole foods diet of anything she wants, that is it's such a huge improvement, and it's such a weight off of me. And so then I started sharing some of these techniques with friends and family and started to see improvement there. And, you know, it's not just for food allergies, it works for so many different things. For example, one of my dearest friends, she came to me and she said, man, I've had a headache for months. And I had a headache too that I'd had for quite a while. And I thought, okay, if both of us have headaches, we got to work on this. So I started doing some of these Dow healing sessions for my friend and myself. And I always check in to see how much time needs to be spent, how many sessions is needed. And in this case, I got 8 sessions. I think it was like 10 or 20 minutes. And so it took me about 8 days to get through those, about one a day. And I'd check in with her periodically, no change, no change. So I finished on a Friday night, very late at night. And I saw her the next day and I said, hey, how's your headache? And She told me, I woke up today for the first time in months without a headache. And then what was even a little bit more remarkable about that is she had had several traumatic brain injuries. And so she had been followed by a neurosurgeon. So she went in for one of her regular checkups a few weeks later. And the neurosurgeon told her, I've been following this vessel and just monitoring it because it was narrowing. And I was concerned about it, that at some point you might end up without any blood flow. She's like, that vessel has essentially died. There's no blood flow going through it, but you have grown a new blood vessel in its place that is feeding that same area. And my friend told me, I know that you did that. So it was just really exciting to be able to use these techniques, not only for my own family, but for so many other people. And I ended up starting to incorporate them into my practice in functional medicine. And some of my clients are open to the more spiritual frequency and vibration side of things. And they're starting to see some of the same results. It's been really, really exciting. But one thing that I find interesting is that throughout this whole entire process, I didn't know how or why it worked. I just knew that it worked. And so I did it all the time. I use it daily, multiple times a day. But when the teachers in some of the seminars would talk about oneness or anything like that, I was like, I have no idea what you're talking about. It was just such a foreign concept that I was like, okay, well, quantum theory, I can maybe understand a little bit about atoms being entangled, but that's about as far as my mind could take it. And then I stumbled upon your podcast and Next Level Soul and some sites that share a lot of NDEs, and all the pieces fell together for me. And I started to understand and feel at a deeper level that connection, that we are all coming from one source, that we are all the same thing. And it just had never made sense to me. And so for that, I'm super grateful to you for putting out such wonderful content, and to the other people who are helping people to really grasp these concepts. And so that's basically how I got to where I am today.
Wow, what an incredible journey that you've had. Thank you so much for sharing.
Absolutely.
I would love to dive a little bit deeper into both sides of the work you do, if you're okay with that.
Absolutely.
I have a huge interest in functional medicine, and we'll get to the energy healing too for anyone watching who's interested. But my mom raised me with functional medicine and eating a whole foods diet. And so I've always had an interest in those things. And I know that the science has really progressed over my lifetime. And
Yes.
I'd love to hear what some of the pillars are for health that you teach your clients.
Yes. Every client is different and they might need a focus in a different area. But the main pillars of functional medicine would be, one, getting the right building blocks, like all the different micronutrients, the minerals, the vitamins, and phytonutrients that really help your body to build the proteins that it needs and all the different cellular structures that it needs to work appropriately. A long time ago, we didn't have all these chips and candies and all this artificial stuff that most of us base our diets off these days. And we were getting a lot more fiber, a lot more magnesium, and things have really changed. Our soils are depleted, and you can't get quite as much unless you are really, really focused on and really intentional on what you're eating, getting a lot of greens and things like that. So that's probably where I start with everybody is, can we make some changes that might give you the building blocks to create the right neurotransmitters and the appropriate barrier for your gut lining and things like that. And then from there, you can focus into different areas. A lot of times it's great to look at your detoxification pathways, what your liver and even your lungs and your skin and your kidneys, Are they able to process what you eat and get rid of the stuff that you don't need? And are there ways that we can support better function of those organs? Healing the gut is so important. You've got this barrier of the intestines that has to let the right nutrients in and keep the stuff that is not needed out. Or your immune system is right on the other side of your gut. Most of your lymph nodes are right there, and they're going to have to deal with it if your gut can't keep the wrong stuff out. And so a lot of people have gut dysfunction, and it could be the wrong microbiome. So the bacteria and other organisms that live in your gut, you might have a whole bunch that are maybe not beneficial, and maybe not enough of the good ones that create things like your short chain fatty acids or different things that really benefit you. They have a role in creating your serotonin. You have more serotonin produced in your gut than in your brain. And so we can have more of a focus on healing the gut, getting the right microbiome in there, making sure that the intestinal integrity is strong and there's not any holes or gaps that are letting the wrong things in. From there, you can focus on hormonal issues. Can you create the right hormones in the right amounts at the right times? And so those would probably be some of the pillars. There's also a huge focus on your stress levels, finding ways to maybe eliminate some sources of stress, but we're always going to have that. So also ways to deal with the stress in a more resilient manner. And then there's your social relationships, finding strategies for having healthier relationships, making sure that you are connected to community. It's so important. There's so many studies showing that is a huge impact on your health. And then there's also the spiritual component. And most functional medicine practitioners will tell you that that's a huge key. And a lot of times when the basic interventions, the nutrients and the detoxification, hormones, when that is not working, it's because there's underlying emotional and spiritual issues. And so there's a lot of different ways to grow in your spiritual life and to release maybe some trapped emotions, but that can be a huge factor. So those would probably be one thing I forgot to mention is your environmental impact. So I had a great teacher who said that sometimes the most important thing is not to detox your body, but to detox your house. So we look at things. Are you breathing clean air? Do you have clean sources of water? Is there anything in your house that's off-gassing that then creates more stress for your liver and other organs to detox? So those are kind of your pillars of functional medicine.
Right. So a lot of those things I can see someone would probably have to come in and have an appointment and have different things tested. But are there any simple things that your average person can implement in their daily life that would just help them to support their overall health?
Absolutely. For me, the starting point is clean eating the perimeter of the supermarket, right? Not getting the stuff in the package. And there's so many websites on there. Like you can look up, Whole30. You can look up a lot of different vegan and raw sites for some really fun. They're dessert-like. They're so much fun, but they taste so good. So getting creative about finding fun ways to get whole foods. That would be one of my number one recommendations. And those can be found on the internet. If you're creative and have a little bit of cooking background, you can find those things. But otherwise, I help clients and find specific recipes that fit their preferences, Then another thing is cleaning up your air. So a good HEPA filter can make a huge difference. We moved to a new build construction, and one of the first things I did was get the filters set up. And then getting a good filter for your water. There's just so many things that go into our water supply. And it's fantastic that water treatment kills things like cholera and things like that. That's
right.
great. But some of the things that they use, like chlorine, will then react with contaminants in the water, creating things that are just not good for us. And so getting a good filter that will get a lot of that stuff out, and a good, so you've got good inputs coming in. Sometimes that's all you really need to bump your health up and maybe get it back on track. But when that's not enough, then I help people with more specific strategies.
Thank you so much for sharing. I would
Yeah.
love to talk a little bit more about the energy healing. This is something I have a huge personal interest in because
Yeah.
I was raised as a Christian also, and I was specifically spent several years in the charismatic word of faith branch of Christianity, where we saw a lot of supernatural healings. And of course, they had their specific way that they explained that. And it worked for a lot of people, but it didn't work for probably even more people. And so I've always just been curious. And I experienced some supernatural healings myself as well.
Yeah.
And I've always been curious, what is the mechanism that's happening here? And is there a way that I could learn to do this and recreate it for myself or for other people? So I'm just curious about the techniques that you have learned and how those work.
Yes. So there's lots of techniques out there, but the ones that have worked best for me are the ones that Master Sha teaches. And so his main premise is, he says over and over again, I have the power to heal myself. You have the power to heal yourself. Together, we have the power to heal the world. And what I like about that is his methods. He might do some pretty big transmissions that can really get you over the hump, but he also says you got to put the time in. You got to spend some time meditating. Sometimes that's focusing on love. Sometimes it's focusing on forgiveness. Sometimes it's visualizing light in certain areas. I end up in a session that I'm either doing for a client or for myself, my family, I'll probably combine maybe 6 to 8 of his techniques into one. But some of it is just that time spent in meditation and being able to bring light to those areas, love, high frequency states of mind. And so when I'm sending love and sending light to different areas in your own body, what Chinese medicine says is where your mind goes, the blood flows and the energy goes. And so that's kind of that's the theory behind it. On a scientific level or quantum level, that would be that idea of quantum entanglement, whereas we all come from the same source. And if you change the spin on one molecule that's entangled with another one, even though they're separated by distance, that one will change its spin as well. And so that kind of gives us an idea that things can be affected at a distance. And so you can, when you start to meditate for someone else, you can make a huge difference. And I think that's where prayer from the Christian perspective can be effective, is because you're sending intention to that person and to that person's body for healing. And that's a huge, huge benefit. It's just fantastic. Now, that's not to say that will work every time, like you experienced, that sometimes it's not going to work. And there may be different reasons for that. It could be that you're not at a high enough vibration yet to bring that about. And maybe that will change in time. It could be that maybe you weren't connecting with it. I think there is an element of faith with it, although not always, because I have definitely done work on people who in my family who didn't believe. And it's made a difference. So, or people who were too young to have that conversation that, hey, I'm working on you. When I work with my daughter, from a young age, I tell her that I'm working on it because it is beneficial to get the mind engaged. There's in medicine, there's the placebo or nocebo effect, where if you think you're getting a real treatment, you might be getting a sugar pill. But the mere thought that you could be getting an effective treatment can then, change the functioning of your body. And likewise, the thought that something bad is happening can then spiral you into an unhealthy state. And that's all because our minds are way more powerful than we think. And so you can explain that on multiple different levels, but that's my explanation of it.
Yeah, thank you so much for breaking that down. So you mentioned a meditation aspect of it, and
Mhm.
that's something that I've used successfully in the past. But also, like you said, there's just so many different techniques that people can use, and it just opens up this whole other world of what's possible for us as
Right.
humanity and how we could really heal and take it to the next level. If we could, like, grow spiritually enough, I guess, to bring ourselves to that vibration that you're talking about where we can connect and bring in the healing.
Yeah. Yep. And there's also an aspect, I haven't been able to, like I said before, I haven't been able to shift everything on my
Mhm.
own. There's an aspect of community that can make a huge, huge difference. Sometimes you need the support of other people. And I think that goes back to that idea that we are all one. And when we try to work from just our limited fractal experience, so, that's kind of isolated, sometimes getting that community can bring us back into a little bit of that oneness that can be the thing that can shift you to that level where you can make some bigger changes.
Right. So something that's really interesting to me that you said is that you were doing this energy healing without understanding necessarily how it was working, and you were still able to accomplish that. But then you ran across the information online that helped you to understand why it worked. Could you share with us what it was specifically that you came to understand about it?
Well, I think the concepts of being one with the universe, one with, and not just the material universe, but just everything that's out there, right? One with spirit. I couldn't grasp that. It didn't make sense to me probably because I'd been so ingrained from a young age that, there's God, the creator, and then there's us, the clay that somehow took the human form and breathed. And we are, but it's very humble. We were so humble to the point that I didn't feel like I had power in myself. Right. And so I just couldn't fathom the idea that I have that God or that universe power. I couldn't get it. And then hearing many, many, many different near-death experiences where they ended up merging into everything and nothing. And starting to hear their experiences of that, starting to hear some people who have maybe their channels or they've done out of body experiences and they've merged with maybe another person or maybe God, what we consider a specific God or something like that. And hearing that over and over again, I think it started to add a depth to that concept that I just needed to hear it from many, many different perspectives. I needed to hear it over and over again until it finally sunk in that, oh, yeah, we're all connected. Me and you and my house and the rock and the trees and the universe and the stars, we are all one. And that was such a freeing concept. It was something that makes me I'd always known that love and kindness was important, but it brought it to a whole nother level. And it helped me with compassion. It helped me to understand, maybe somebody is having an experience that has not been so positive, and maybe they're not behaving in a way that is what I consider loving, but being able to honor that they're having their experience and that at the end of the day, we're all going back to the same place. we're all going back together. That was enlightening to me.
Wow. I can really relate to when you said that it took you hearing it from multiple different sources to really grasp it, because it's such a completely different paradigm than
Mhm.
what we're raised with. And especially if you are raised in a religious background where you're taught that this is all demonic and wrong, it can take a lot to shift that.
It can. I needed little steps along the
Yeah.
way. I mean, from even just having some friends that were Christian, but more on the mystical side when I was in high school and college and shortly after. That was kind of my very first introduction to some of these other spiritual concepts. I needed to ease into it, because going straight into it, I think, would have been too much of a shock to my paradigm and my system.
Right. Well, I have one final question, and you've probably already touched on this a little bit, but I like to just make things as practical for people as we can. So let's say somebody's listening who is really struggling with some kind of a health issue, and they'd like to do some type of energy healing on themselves. Do you have any specific recommendations of things they could try?
Absolutely. The first thing is to go into it with a mindset that this is possible. And just a spark of that belief can make all the difference in the world. And then know that love and forgiveness are two of the highest frequencies, along with gratitude. And what you can do is start sending love and light. I usually imagine a ball of light that's almost like a mini sun wherever wherever that needs to be. Like maybe I'm dealing with some GI issues. So it's important to tell maybe your small intestine, you've got a lot of bloating or something like that, to tell your small intestine that you're grateful for how it's gotten you through life so far, because it's served an important function and maybe it's just tired right now. So to give it some gratitude, and know that it has a soul, it has vibration, and your interaction with it will, through thought, through words, can make a difference. And so then from that point, I visualize light, and I will just say to that area, I love you. I love you. I love you. Thank you for what you've done so far. You have the power to heal yourself. And sometimes touch can make a huge difference. So your hands are electromagnetic, and they're one of the most electromagnetic places on your body. So you can put your hands on your stomach. I'll sometimes just go to bed sleeping with my hands on any area that's got some problems, and you can make a difference that way. But you can just waking it up physically through touching, tapping, anything like that, and then sending it that love intentionally through meditation. That's probably one of the best places to start.
Thank you so much. That's really helpful.
Yeah.
I would love to give you a chance to share with the viewers where they can find you, and also if there's anywhere that people can find Master Sha's teachings. Was that his name?
Yes. Yes. So I believe his website is .com, but you can also just Google Master Zhigang Sha. So that's ZHIGANG, and his last name is SHA. And he's fantastic. He's from China, and so his English is limited, but man, is he powerful. He's so neat. So I really love his work. Feel free to check out his website. He's got videos posted on YouTube too. And so he'll do little mini healing sessions on YouTube and on Instagram. And then my website is www.vivante, that's VIVANTE, nutrition.com.
Thank you so much. I'll have those links in the show notes. And Britt, thank you so much for being willing to share. You've shared so much valuable information with us today, and I really appreciate it.
Oh, thank you so much, Melissa. It's been my pleasure.
Likewise.
Thank you for watching and listening. Your views, likes, comments, and shares truly make the biggest difference in supporting this channel. Don't forget to check the show notes for all the links to today's guest, as well as my links. You'll find me on social media at Love Covered Life, my website, lovecoveredlife.com, and the Be a Guest link for anybody who would like to be a guest on the channel. I have great news. Love Covered Life podcast is coming available on audio podcast. You can find it wherever you listen to your audio podcasts.